Warsaw, November 1944. A skeletal figure crouches in the rubble of what was once a kitchen. His hands shake as they search through debris for anything edible. The city around him is a graveyard, every building gutted, every street empty. The Polish population evacuated by force, German troops preparing their final retreat. Of the 400,000 Jews who once lived here, perhaps 20 remain alive, hidden in cellars and buried in ruins, waiting to die or be discovered. This man is one of them, Władysław Szpilman. Once famous, once celebrated, now just bones and rags moving through the skeleton of a city that no longer exists. Then he hears it, a voice behind him, cold and commanding, German. "What are you doing here?" Szpilman freezes, his heart stops. He turns slowly to see a tall German officer standing in the doorway, arms crossed, face unreadable, captain's insignia on his collar. This is the end. Szpilman knows it. Arrest, interrogation, a bullet, or worse, deportation to whatever camps are still operating in this final winter of the war. But the officer doesn't draw his weapon. Instead, he asks something impossible. "Are you really a pianist? Prove it." What happens next will save one man's life and condemn another to death in a Soviet prison. The pianist will survive to tell the story. The officer will die, never knowing his mercy was remembered. This is how a piece of music played in the ruins became a bridge between two men on opposite sides of hell. Władysław Szpilman was born December 5, 1911, in Soviet Poland, into a Jewish family that valued education and culture above everything. Music wasn't just entertainment in their household. It was language, identity, survival. Young Szpilman showed talent early. By his teens, he was studying at the Chopin Academy of Music in Warsaw, mastering the same composer whose work would later save his life. In 1931, he moved to Berlin to study at the Academy of Arts, training under masters and performing in halls that mattered. He was building a career. Then 1933 arrived. A new regime took power in Germany. The atmosphere changed overnight. Jewish students felt it first in the looks, the whispers, the new rules. Szpilman read the signs and made a choice that would keep him alive 6 years longer than it otherwise might. He returned to Warsaw. By 1935, he wasn't just surviving, but thriving. Warsaw's cultural scene embraced him. He performed classical repertoire and jazz with equal skill, specializing in Chopin. Polish radio hired him as their house pianist, a prestigious position with regular broadcasts and growing fame. The future looked bright. September 23, 1939 shattered everything. Szpilman sat at the piano in the Polish radio studio performing Chopin's Nocturne in C minor. The piece was halfway through when the building shook. German bombs were falling on Warsaw. The broadcast cut mid-performance. The music stopped. The silence that followed would last 6 years. By November 1940, that silence had been replaced by something worse. German authorities sealed off a district of Warsaw and forced every Jew in the city inside. In 1942, the deportations began. Train cars arrived at the ghetto gates. German and Jewish police forced families aboard. The trains went to Treblinka. Nobody returned. When Szpilman's family received their notice, they gathered what they could carry and joined the line at the assembly point. Szpilman was walking toward the train when someone grabbed his arm. A member of the Jewish police who recognized him, a music lover who knew his recordings. The man pulled Szpilman out of line against regulations, against orders, just because he was a talented musician and that felt worth saving. Szpilman stepped back. His family kept walking. His mother, his father, his brother, his sisters. They boarded the train. He watched them go. They were murdered at Treblinka within hours of arrival. He never saw them again. In February 1943, Szpilman escaped the ghetto with help from Polish friends on the outside. This wasn't simple. The ghetto wall was guarded constantly. Anyone caught helping Jews faced immediate execution. Not just the helper, but their entire family. Yet Polish friends hid him anyway. For over a year, he moved between apartments. Different people took the risk, brought him food, kept him hidden. They knew what would happen if they were discovered. They did it anyway. August 1944 brought the Warsaw Uprising. For 63 days, Polish resistance fighters battled German forces for control of the city. It wasn't a military operation, but a desperate attempt to free Warsaw before Soviet troops arrived. The Germans crushed it with systematic brutality. Between 150,000 and 200,000 Polish civilians died in the fighting and reprisals. In October, after the uprising failed, German authorities evacuated every remaining Polish civilian from Warsaw, then began destroying the city building by building, burning, and demolishing. Warsaw was to be erased from existence as punishment for resistance. Szpilman's Polish protectors were evacuated with everyone else. They had no choice. Staying meant death. They left him hidden in an attic with what food they could spare and prayers that somehow he'd survive. Now he was alone, completely alone, in a city of ruins with no population. German patrols hunted for holdouts. Winter was approaching. He had no steady source of food or water. Jaundiced and starving, he moved from building to building like a ghost haunting his own city. In mid-November 1944, Szpilman found an abandoned building at Aleja Niepodległości 223. It had been German military headquarters before they evacuated. Maybe there was food left behind. He searched the kitchen desperately, his hands shaking, his vision blurring. Starvation was killing him slowly. Then came the voice. The German officer who discovered him was Wilhelm Hosenfeld, born May 2, 1895, in Mackenzel, Germany, into a devout Catholic family. He served in World War I, earned the Iron Cross, and became a school teacher after the war. He married Anne Marie in 1920 and raised 5 children. In 1935, like millions of Germans, Hosenfeld joined the party, believing the promises of national renewal and economic recovery. By 1939, he'd started having doubts about the violence and rhetoric, but he was already committed. When war broke out in August 1939, Hosenfeld was drafted at age 44 and posted to Poland. His first assignment was running a POW camp for Polish soldiers, but even then he showed humanity where regulations demanded harshness. He allowed families to visit prisoners despite orders forbidding it, and released several prisoners. In July 1940, he was stationed in Warsaw as sports and culture officer, organizing athletic activities and education programs for German soldiers. It was administrative work, safe and boring. But what he witnessed in Warsaw destroyed whatever loyalty he had left. The ghetto with 400,000 Jews crammed into a tiny district, starving in the streets, dying of disease. The deportation starting in 1942, the brutality of the liquidation. Hosenfeld started keeping a private diary where he wrote words that would get him executed if discovered. With the horrible mass murder of the Jews, we have lost this war. We have brought an indelible shame upon ourselves, a curse that cannot be lifted. He didn't just write, he acted. He employed Leon Worm, a Jew who escaped from a train headed to Treblinka, giving him false papers and a job. He intervened to free Poles from detention. During the Warsaw Uprising in summer 1944, when assigned to interrogate captured resistance fighters, his orders were clear: treat them as criminals and execute them after interrogation. Instead, Hosenfeld demanded they be treated according to Geneva Convention rules. He admired their courage and tried to help those he could, defying direct orders. By November 1944, Hosenfeld knew Germany had lost. Soviet forces were approaching from the east, but he was still a German officer doing his duty, and his current assignment was preparing buildings for use by retreating German units. That's why he was at the building when he found Szpilman in the kitchen. After discovering Szpilman, Hosenfeld asked his profession. When Szpilman whispered that he was a pianist, something shifted behind the officer's eyes. He led Szpilman downstairs to a room with a piano and said simply, "Prove it." Szpilman sat at the instrument, his hands stiff from cold and malnutrition, his fingers barely responding. He chose the piece that mattered most: Chopin's Nocturne in C minor, the same piece he was playing on Polish radio when the war started. The performance interrupted by German bombs. The notes came slowly at first. His technique was rough. 5 years of starvation and hiding had damaged his body. But the music was still there, the soul of the piece, the melancholy beauty that Chopin poured into these measures. The German officer stood motionless, listening, his face revealing nothing. When Szpilman finished, silence filled the room. Then the officer spoke. "You'll stay here, in the attic. I'll bring you food." Hosenfeld allowed Szpilman to hide in the attic and brought him bread and jam from his own rations. He gave him his German military coat to survive the freezing winter nights and returned regularly with food and news. They spoke little. One was trying to survive. The other was trying to save him. Words didn't add much. "The war will end soon," Hosenfeld told him. "The Soviet army is approaching. Hold on just a little longer." In mid-December 1944, Hosenfeld came to the attic for the last time. He brought extra bread and a warm blanket. His unit was evacuating Warsaw ahead of the Soviet advance. The Red Army would arrive any day. Before leaving, he spoke carefully. "If you survive, if Germany loses and things change, my name is Wilhelm Hosenfeld. Remember it if you can help me." Szpilman was stunned. This man had saved his life repeatedly and asked nothing in return. Now he was giving his name as if Szpilman might someday have power to help him. "You haven't asked me," Szpilman said, "but I want you to remember, Szpilman, Polish radio. If something happens to you and I can help, remember that name." Warsaw was liberated by Soviet forces on January 17, 1945. Szpilman survived, emerging from the ruins weighing barely 80 pounds, but alive. He returned to Polish radio and resumed his career. In his first post-war broadcast, he played Chopin's Nocturne in C minor, the same piece interrupted by German bombs in 1939, the same piece he played for Hosenfeld in the ruins. The music completed its journey. He immediately wrote a memoir published in 1946 as Death of a City, describing the German officer who saved him, but Soviet authorities censored it, changing the officer's nationality from German to Austrian, because acknowledging a German humanitarian act contradicted their propaganda. On the same day, Warsaw was liberated. Wilhelm Hosenfeld was captured by Soviet forces during a skirmish near Blony. He was imprisoned immediately and charged with war crimes because he interrogated prisoners during the Warsaw Uprising. In 1946, from prison, Hosenfeld wrote to his wife listing names of Jews and Poles he saved, begging her to find them and ask them to testify. In November 1950, Leon Warm visited Hosenfeld's wife and told her he'd met Hosenfeld in a Soviet POW camp. Szpilman and others petitioned Soviet authorities for Hosenfeld's release, providing detailed testimony about his humanitarian actions. The Soviets refused to consider any of it. On May 7, 1950, a military tribunal in Minsk sentenced Hosenfeld to 25 years hard labor in a one-page verdict. The trial was conducted without defense counsel. Hosenfeld's health collapsed in captivity. He'd suffered a stroke in 1947 that paralyzed his right side. On August 13, 1952, he died of an aortic rupture in a Soviet prison hospital at age 57. He never learned that the pianist he saved was alive and trying to free him. For decades, Hosenfeld remained unknown. Szpilman's memoir was censored and forgotten, but in 1998, Szpilman's son Andrei published a new edition in German and English titled The Pianist, including excerpts from Hosenfeld's diary. The book became an international sensation. In 2002, director Roman Polanski adapted it into a film that won the Palme d'Or at Cannes and 3 Academy Awards, bringing worldwide attention to both men's stories. In 1998, Szpilman applied to Yad Vashem to have Hosenfeld recognized as righteous among the nations. After initial rejection and the emergence of new evidence showing Hosenfeld as complete diaries and letters, proving his consistent opposition to atrocities, Yad Vashem posthumously recognized Wilhelm Hosenfeld on February 16, 2009. On June 19, 2009, his son Detlev received the medal in Berlin from Israeli diplomats. On December 4, 2011, a commemorative plaque was unveiled at 223 Aleja Niepodległości in Warsaw, where Szpilman's widow, son, and Hosenfeld's daughter attended the ceremony. Władysław Szpilman died on July 6, 2000, at age 88, having spent the last 55 years of his life trying to honor the German officer who saved him, Wilhelm Hosenfeld's story isn't about rebellion or dramatic resistance. It's about quiet choices made in a world gone mad. He wore the same uniform as the men who destroyed cities and murdered millions. He served the same regime. He followed the same orders. Until he didn't. In the ruins of Warsaw, he found a starving pianist and made a choice. He brought food instead of bullets. He offered protection instead of arrest. He gave his coat to a man his government wanted dead. Hosenfeld died in a Soviet prison, never knowing he'd made a difference, never knowing Szpilman survived, never knowing his name would be remembered and honored. But Szpilman never forgot. He searched for years, petitioned for his release, and dedicated his memoir to the officer who saved his life. In the end, one act of mercy in the ruins became a story the world would never forget. The pianist lived to play again. The officer died in chains. But the music they shared in that moment transcended everything that tried to destroy it.